your line on that was very, very important, because it could have been a possible option at the time to remove that. But the preschool, the free preschool year in early childhood care and education was introduced by the former Children's Minister Barry Enders in January 2010. Under the scheme, in return for providing the free preschool year to eligible children, a preschool service is paid in an annual capitation for each eligible child enrolled. The children are eligible to participate in the scheme when they are aged between 3 years and 3 months and 4 years 6 months in September of the relevant year. The scheme has been an outstanding take-up success. At September 2010, some 4,300 preschool services, or 95% of all such services, were participating in the scheme. 63,000 children, or 94% of all eligible children, were availed of the preschool year. And I can see firsthand the benefit of the preschool year for children. Now, I suppose, benefit myself from a wonderful preschool life, because I was the youngest of 8 children. I was at home with my beloved mother, who was born in Glasgow. And, you know, every family can't have that type of situation. So I had a one-to-one preschool education with a very intelligent woman who certainly, you know, we listened to the radio and music and Scottish music and chat and discussion. So, of course, I was very reluctant then to go to school. That was the next step. Life was so wonderful for me and pleasant in Roscommon town in the walk, in humble surroundings. But what was there was, most importantly of all, is love. Love is the most important thing when it comes to children. Knowing that you're wanted and loved. So I eventually went to school in Roscommon, and I decided that having a school bag was not a very good idea at that stage. So I decided I would hide it for about a month or so. It meant I went a much nicer time. But I was blessed then by meeting Sister Anthony, and she was my first teacher at Convent of Mercy in Roscommon town. And she was a wonderful, beautiful person, and she died recently, God be good to her. But she gave us, and the classes were big, there could be 50 children in that class, and she gave us that first years, which was the love of the teacher and the respect for each one of us, as if every one of us was that important. That was the key, the ability she had. And every young boy and girl that were mixed into the lovely, that was the start off in Roscommon. But that's why teaching is so important, and teachers are so important. And the kind of confidence that you build up. Now, looking back on those years, like how a very simple but very quality, and I want to say, you know, the Sisters of Mercy and other orders have come in for severe criticism in relation to Magdalene laundries, and that is so, and that is tragic. But in relation to the teaching ability of primary school, I would say it was second to none. They were well qualified teachers, and they had a very nice humane church. That's my personal experience. So I just think that the work that you're doing, Minister, is so vital to allow children to have that confidence, and the confidence to learn and to continue on learning. And learning is a continuous experience, as you know, Minister, yourself. You're in that department, I was in government departments, and you're given so much briefs and discussions, you're learning all the time. And that's why the preschool, because every family can't have a situation, there's couples, or both couples or partners are working, and then in the preschool range, and I witnessed the work that's going in the preschools, it's excellent work. It's a lovely confidence-building approach I could see from my own experience seeing my own granddaughter in that environment. So I just want to say, whatever work you do in that particular regard, maintain that service. Of course, it would be wonderful to expand it further as well, but at least that one free, it's free, not free, it's paid by the state, but it gives families a great start to that particular time. And the interaction between children of that age is wonderful, and they're learning and continuously learning, and that's why at the earlier stage that you're exposed to education, the better. And even question of languages at very early stage also is something that is not your responsibility. You're not Minister for Education, but you're Minister for Children. But I just think that what we're doing, and I say again that, you know, foreign ministers like Brian Lenihan and Brendan Smith and Barry Andrews, and then you were the first minister at cabinet level. I've just finished now, okay, that were promoted at cabinet level. This was very important. Now, they were in the cabinet room, which was vitally important. So it's a step in the right direction. They were moving, and now you've taken over and built on their work. So I just want to say, Minister, I want to wish you well in your work. I think you're doing an extremely good job, and I wish you success in setting up the agency. You have a lot of work involved there, and you have my full support to support this side of the House in the work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Leyden, agus Vito Creighton in Michael, and Senator Imelda Henry.
Thank you, Oscar here. And again, Minister, it's always lovely to have you here in the House, and it just reminds us how lucky we are to have a Minister, a department solely for children and youth affairs. And indeed, since you were here last, we had the children's referendum, and I want to congratulate you on your hard work and the success of that referendum. And maybe when you reply to us, you might just update us as to what has happened since the passing of the referendum. I know you told us that when you were first appointed and that you would have a full department that would do your best to bring a seamless new approach to policy development and integrated service provision for children, with the ultimate objective of ensuring children are cared for and protected and that they have the best possible start in life. You're almost 2 years in that position, and certainly you've done an awful lot of work in that regard. What we have to focus on what is best for children, and all studies point to the importance of the best possible start, the importance of the early years and early intervention. And early intervention in children's lives and quality early childhood experiences are crucial to a child's emotional, cognitive and social development. I suppose regrettable, it must be said, that Ireland has been behind many other countries when it comes to our early years sector, and for too long we placed the emphasis solely on supporting the parents and not on providing supports for the development of the child. That era is at an end, and we now know that children must come first. And I know, Minister, that you're doing that now. I suppose the department has provided targeted support to parents to assist them with the cost of childcare. This support is provided through the provision of 3 childcare support programmes: the Early Childhood Care and Education Scheme, which is the free school year; the Childcare Community Subvention Scheme, which supports nearly 24,000 children through community creches, and the Community Employment and Training Scheme, which provides some 2,500 full-time equivalent childcare places. And in 2012, the total expenditure on these programmes was in the region of 240 million, and I'm pleased that the Minister has committed to maintaining the universality of the free school year despite increased demand. Minister, you and your department have done an enormous amount of work during the preparation of Ireland's first ever early years strategy, which is expected to be completed this summer. We must always try to strive towards providing a range of services that are affordable and accessible, so that parents can easier balance their work responsibilities with their parental ones. Childcare not only supports participation of parents in the labour force, but it's also, as you said in your speech, it's a direct job activation measure. It creates jobs, and as you said, the preschool year in Ireland currently supports approximately 7,000 jobs in childcare, and for every 10 or 11 additional childcare places provided, a new job will be created. This is all progress, and we are moving in the right direction. We are moving with some speed and commitment. We have a committed and dedicated Minister in you, who I know is determined to see change. Recent years have seen welcome changes, and the universal free preschool year scheme has a very high take-up rate. Some 95% of 3 to 4-year-olds are participating and availing of a very quality service. This means that children who have had special education needs, or indeed maybe suffering from neglect, are coming into contact at a much earlier age with childcare professionals. They get assessed earlier because their problems are noticed earlier, and they get a better start. Even simple things like a child getting spectacles when they are 2 or 3 instead of when they are 5 or 6 can make an enormous difference, all for the better. Early intervention will also play a significant part in Ireland's future economic planning. There is an increasing acceptance and focus internationally on the economic benefits accruing from investment in early years. As you said, long-term studies in the US, England or France show returns to the economy of between 3 and 10 times the original investment. In these studies, children who experience high-quality preschool are higher achievers in education and in employment, and these benefits also transfer to the next generation. I am pleased that we are carrying out our own research here in Ireland, and from this we are getting significant information which is allowing us to cost services that we need. I know you and the Taoiseach were at the last British-Irish Council Summit in Cardiff, and it was discussed the success of Ireland's preschool year. Also, the Scottish Government spoke about the innovative National Parenting Strategy, which seeks to support parents in securing the best outcomes with respect to their children's development, health and well-being. And also in the UK and Northern Ireland, they studied the effective provision of preschool education study, which came up with, irrespective of level of multiple disadvantage home children, those who had little or no preschool experience show poorer cognitive and social behavioural outcomes at entry to school and at the end of year one than those who attended preschool. On that note, I conclude my remarks, Minister, and I would wish you luck in your ministry, and to congratulate you again on the wonderful work that you've done so far in your department.
Thank you, Senator Henry. Senator Barrett, Lenahull.
It's this side.
Oh, Gorman-Escale, okay. Gillian Van Turnout, and I understand you're sharing with...
No, I'm the first speaker. Senator Sapone will join later in the
She's
debate.
oh,
Gorman-Escale,
I couldn't read. I couldn't read the signs.
No
I'm
problem.
sorry.
No
I read
problem.
them wrong.
No problem.
Thank you, Gorman-Escale.
Here, look. Minister, as always, you're more than welcome to the House, and it's delighted to have you here. And in fact, the statement that you put before us today and your speech is actually quite seminal. And I actually think the statement should be circulated, because I think you were very fair in giving your time to try and give us a summary of what you've put before us today. But actually, the foundations here are such a strong foundation for a new home for children. For me, I just want to commend you, and I can't commend you enough for what is here. And I just think more people should get to read it, because it's that whole picture. All too often we only focus in one part of a child's life, and it's looking at that journey that a child goes through. That for me is so important. So thank you for providing that vision and starting this discussion that we're having with a very strong foundation. Obviously, Minister, prevention and early intervention is something that everybody supports, but for me, it's music to all our ears to hear a minister actually promoting it and putting it first and foremost. All too often, it's more in seminars and symposiums that people talk about these theories, and then we get into the House and we talk about firefighting and dealing with crisis, and not actually giving prevention and early intervention the thought and deliberation that they need. And I do very much welcome the area-based approach to child poverty initiative and looking at what you're going to do there. And I suppose the difficulty I have is just trying to look at, you know, of the selection criteria for the 3 new sites and the additional 4 that will come on. How do we ensure that that selection process is transparent, that the programmes are rooted in evidence and best practice, as you said, you know, because there can be programmes that can look good, but if they're not providing the outcomes for children and the delivery that we all wish, how do we ensure that they can? So I suppose for me, I'm just trying to look at more details, because all too often when we talk about early intervention, we all fall a little bit, we talk just about early years, and that's why I really do welcome your speech, because you looked at that journey a child goes on, the key transition points, those flash points in a child's life that all too often get missed. We see it in disability services. It tends to be at a much younger age if we don't get in there early with children, their life chances. But mental health tends to be early as adolescence, that we see the mental health issues become more apparent during an early adolescence phase. And in fact, you mentioned Heckman, and Kuna and Heckman in 2010 did a working paper on investment in our young people. And in there they've shown, the research has shown that the effects of early intervention in disadvantaged children's lives is lessened if it's not followed up by later investments at later stages. So we all talk about the investment and the importance and the reap that we get from investing in early years. But if we don't give that continuum of supports, that investment is actually lost, and we don't continue to have that investment. Minister, I do very much welcome your focus in looking at how we can look at services and providing services, and maybe moving away. And you mentioned the advisory report, and we had a good brief debate in the House, and we are going to continue the debate in the House with Minister Burton. But it was very welcome that she came in so soon after the report was published, to actually look and say, how do we, to maybe take a step back and say, what is the purpose of child benefit? How do we ensure that we get the delivery of outcomes for child benefit that we should be getting and that people want us to get? So do we look more at the affordable, accessible and quality childcare? Do we look at extending the scheme to a second year? Do we look at after-school childcare? Because that's done very much on an ad hoc basis at the moment. It doesn't have the same structure. Do we look at university primary healthcare for all children? School book schemes? There's different ways that we can provide services and support to children. But I do wish to mention, Minister, about data. You mentioned about the developments that we've had in data, and I think that is very welcome, and I do welcome your approach in trying to ensure that we do have an evidence base in how we move forward, and we actually understand. And very often when I hear economists talking about demographics, I'm shouting at the radio, that's birth rate, as you said yourself, Minister. We have an increase in birth rates, but economists don't seem to want to talk. They'll talk about demographics, but that is what we're talking about. It is about children, and I think all too often children are forgotten in these issues. And if we look, for example, Eurofund, which you mentioned yourself in the paper, Minister, the foundation out in Loughlinstown for the improvement of living and working conditions. I visited them recently, and they're doing some really interesting research looking at children, looking at parenting supports and how those parenting supports can be best delivered for children. And for me, is if we look at that transition of a child and get to the young person, those young people who are not in education, employment or training. Ireland has the 4th highest rate number of young people who are in the NEET category in the EU. Now that's not an area we want to be up at 4th highest. We want to be down low on that list. And the difficulty is, if you look at those NEET figures, if you go to school teachers, if you go to youth workers, they can point out those young people much earlier on in the cycle, and it's where we should be intervening in the cycle. And so for me, it's trying to look, Eurofund on the job seekers, they did a cost of the economic loss to society, and they calculated for Ireland that we lose in the region of 2% of GDP, which indicates that the cost of youth unemployment is 3.16 billion. And so I think when we're talking in those sort of economic figures, that's the cost of youth unemployment. But it has been proven that if a young person is living in poverty, they're likely to go on to unemployment. That pathway is set. So for me, it's very important to get in earlier and to really help to change that young person's life. And Minister, I do welcome that you've actually asked the youth work sector to investigate how do we intervene? How do we best ensure that point? And I do welcome that, because I do think we need to look at that tipping point for a young person, where they will go into unemployment versus getting education, training or employment, and to see how we can support those young people. And Minister, I just want to mention, next week I know you're having the EU Youth Conference on social inclusion of young people, and I think that's really significant that Ireland has chosen to host that conference under its Irish presidency, and I was delighted to see that you're doing it in cooperation with the European Commission, the European Youth Forum and the National Youth Council of Ireland. And I don't know if you know, Minister, but actually during the 5th Irish presidency of the European Union, the European Youth Forum was born. It had its inaugural meeting in Cork on the 6th of July 1996, and I know this because I was there. I'm actually a co-founder of the European Youth Forum. I was one of the previous Secretary Generals of the 3 youth platforms, and we came together to merge into one. And in fact, 2 of the 3 Secretary Generals were Irish at the time, and we came together and we had the inaugural meeting in Cork under the Irish presidency in July 1996. So for me, it's even more delighted to see them coming back to Dublin. Minister, I just want to also touch on the Child and Family Support Agency. I very much welcome the moves that are happening, welcome the development. I look forward to seeing the bill. As you know yourself, Minister, I've made public my opinions on trying to ensure that we have a debate on this issue. But just one point, Minister, I wish to raise with you is the new agency will have a budget of 545 million for 2013, and in the hearings that we had at the Health and Children Committee last week, it was said that approximately 100 million will be going to NGOs and services. And when it was published in the Irish Times, my opinion on the new agency, what surprised me was the number of organisations who contacted me that they're fearful to talk about it publicly because they're fearful of the funding they get, that funding will be cut, and that chilling effect. So I do think we need to create an environment where people can come constructively with proposals to ensure that the agency works. So there is a little chilling effect happening at the moment that I know, Minister, it's not your intention, and it surprised me by the number and the types of organisations who came to me about it. So I just wanted to raise that with you, because I know it's not something that you would have any intention to do, but it's the reality of what's happening. But thank you, Minister. As I said, I think the paper that you've put before us today should be circulated to all TDs and senators. Thank you for it.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Aileen Hayden, to the Hall.
Thank you very much, Lascar Look, I'd also like to welcome the Minister to the House and to note that today is, I think it's the anniversary of a similar debate which we held on the 7th of March last year. So it's as good as there or thereabouts. I know it's common in business to schedule certain topics on board agendas on an annual basis. For example, corporate governance or risk management. And I think it's a good practice to take a similar approach in the world of politics, particularly in an area such as the one we're discussing. In the debate last year, it was noted that we had spent 1.3 billion in early childhood in the previous decade. And I think it would be honest and fair to say, with respect to this government and to the previous government, that as the previous decade progressed, our understanding of the importance of early intervention in establishing outcomes for children, and whether they be educational outcomes, health outcomes, welfare outcomes, and of course child protection outcomes, improved considerably. I would like to say, and put it on the record, I think this government has made a particular commitment to Irish children, with both the appointment of yourself, Minister Fitzgerald, with full responsibility, with a full cabinet post, but also I think putting the children's referendum to the Irish people also was an important step in recognising the importance of Irish children and our commitment to Irish children. Like a lot of people, I wished that the referendum had passed with a greater majority. But I'm also conscious of the fact that I think the failure to overwhelmingly endorse the referendum did signify a reluctance on the part of the Irish people and a concern at the performance, the failures of the state previously to protect children. And, you know, unfortunately, some of those failures were more recent. And I'm thinking, for example, of the case of the family in Monageer, where unfortunately they took their own lives, and it was made evident that there were many shortcomings in the social services in this country. I suppose an aspect, like Senator Van Turnhout, I'd like to congratulate you on the I suppose, wouldn't really call it a speech so much as a document that you circulated to us, and I agree with her. It is an excellent document, and I think it should be circulated to all members of the Oireachtas because it's very comprehensive. In a way, it's almost like an academic paper, but it does cover very comprehensively all of the bases and provides a very strong justification for the importance of early intervention. And I must say, as someone who is passionately committed to equality in our society, there's no doubt in my mind that the measures that are there in society that enshrine inequality are there at a very early stage of a child's life. Children, for example, who come from families where there's a high standard of education and a commitment to learning do better in school. And there's plenty of research to demonstrate that environments where parents read and there are books evident in the home perform better in an educational environment. And I mean, one of the things I was struck by in the paper on early intervention was the acknowledgement that assistance to parents is very important, particularly assistance to parents where there isn't necessarily an environment of learning in the early lives of the parents themselves. I mean, you know, it's also true to say that children who go to school properly nourished, for example, learn better. And the evidence shows that the level of nutrition that children receive from birth, and in fact even before, influences the brain growth and brain activity of children. So I suppose really what I'm saying, Minister, is that life chances of children are determined from a very early stage, and that those life chances are deeply connected to social and economic inequality. And I was struck by comments by the former governor of Mountjoy Prison, John Lonergan, that the vast majority of the prison population came from a number of particularly deprived areas in Dublin, which were easily identifiable. And apart from the 2011 OECD report, In 2005, the National Economic and Social Forum published a report titled Early Childhood Care and Education, and they stated that ability gaps open early and they persist, and that this is true for other forms of verbal and mathematical ability, as well as cognitive behaviour. In 2002, research into the courts system in Ireland found that children in front of the courts were more inclined to come, or more likely to come, from single-parent families, families with low incomes, families in consistent poverty, families where parents were in long-term unemployment, and families that were experiencing poor housing. So it is important that we don't lose sight of the fact that the outcomes that children have do reflect the wider society in which they live. And it is certainly true to say that we can intervene in very positive ways in those outcomes. And I would like to pay tribute to the work of organisations like Bernardo's, for example, who do intervene in those type of communities to bring about very positive outcomes. And research that Bernardo's have done to say that for every euro that's spent in intervening in a child's life, the state ultimately saves €8. And also the work of Professor Pat Dolan, joint founder and director of UNESCO Child and Family Research Centre in NUI Galway, who estimates that there's evidence that for every euro spent, there's a €29 return to the state. You know, I'd also like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to the work of the local area partnerships in this country to tackle the scourge of poverty, which children are the principal victims of. And again, I highlight the work done by, say, the Ballymun Partnership, who work hand in hand with the local community, not just to promote local job growth, but to actively promote learning through projects such as Young Ballymun, the Young Ballymun Initiative, and so on. And with that in mind, Minister, I'd like to ask you to be very cautious in cutting youth services budgets, particularly those that have an enormous importance in deprived areas such as Blanchardstown, for example, and Ballymun, Darndale, Tala, and other areas where a little money goes a long way in giving many young people a leg up at a critical point in their lives. I would just like to say, Minister, that aside from intervening early and there's clear evidence that early intervention is of critical importance, that intervention has to be effective. And I'm conscious, for example, that in the 4 Dublin local authorities, there is a spend of €29,000 for every homeless person in the region. And that's not including the amount that's raised in charitable donations. And yet, research that was carried out by the Children's Research Centre in Trinity College showed that many young people who were interviewed for their research were known to the various agencies of the state, including childcare agencies, youth homelessness services, and the criminal justice system. But in spite of the engagements that those young people had with the state in its various forms, we still had a situation where 2 out of every 3 children who had been in state care were homeless within 2 years of leaving a care setting. Therefore, I think we have to be very cognizant of that the outcomes are not just related to the services that are available, but they're also related to the quality of those services. And to echo sentiments of Senator Van Turnhout, I really hope that the new Child and Family Support Agency fulfills all of the hopes which I know you have for that agency, and I hope that we will see the relevant legislation in early course. I would just like to finish by saying that, you know, it is quite clear that early intervention is a key critical issue, not just in the area of education, but as I said, in the area of health, in the area of engagement with the criminal justice system, and so on. But I was very struck by the fact that looking at the Heckman curve there, that in your paper, that it's quite clear that the earlier you intervene in somebody's life, the more effective that is. And again, I must say and emphasise that a lot of this is an outcome of poverty, and it's an outcome of social inclusion, and we can never forget the wider picture.
Margaret, Senator Sean Ballard, you have 8 minutes.
And welcome, of course, to the Minister, as always, when she comes to this House. I think everybody is stimulated by what she has to say to us. We're looking at starting out, I think, on a whole new public service looking after the preschool group in a much more systematic way than we did before. And we're trying to do it from the perspective of a country which is broke. Some people I think in Sunday Business Post last Sunday said to public servants, take Croke Park, it's getting you way more wages than you would get in Germany, for example. I think that's part of the background that we face, Minister, that we, through social partnership, I believe, we've designed an extremely expensive public sector in terms of providing services. And that makes me cautious about embarking on another round. We doubled the number of staff in the health service between 1985 and 2009, from 55,000 staff to 110,000 staff. Mr. Howland's best efforts have got it back to 103. We really have to ask what on earth was happening with all that extra employment. And you hear dreadful numbers about the cost of children in care and so on that the Committee on Public Accounts brings up. So we have an extremely large number of people, extremely highly paid by international standards, making it difficult for us to tackle urgent problems like the one we're discussing this afternoon. You know, being in favour of public expenditure may mean you just end up with more highly paid public servants. And there's another figure in on board SNP that the biggest increase, this is on page 12 of volume 1, biggest increase has been at managerial level. Our managerial higher management levels in the public service grew by 82% in the period 1997 to 2009, when civil service numbers as a whole increased by 27%. I get too much correspondence from deputy area regional managers of whatever they're talking about, and too little from people actually on the ground helping in the tasks that the Minister has illustrated for us. And, you know, where would we get the money to pay for the proposal we have before us this afternoon? Well, the other SNP volume looked at special needs assistants who went from to 10,500 compared to in 2009, compared to 6,000 in 2004-05. The budget grew from 130 million to 350 million. You know, has anybody evaluated what was supposed to be happening there? Was it just making life easier for teachers, or were there any actual results? Because that is, I mean, are there any private sector firms in Ireland that employ 10,500 people? And we have to ask those kind of awkward questions. And it doesn't mean that the people asking them have formed a dislike to children or a dislike to poor people. They're just asking, when does this huge expenditure come in with results? So when we say we would like to shift child benefit, as per the Mangan report, more towards services, what kind of services and what would they do? We do have a very high cash level. My interpretation of that, Minister, and I said when Minister Burton was here, while there appear to be less results, and I appreciate your studies from Scandinavia, is the higher proportion of children in Ireland in jobless households. And as you know, Dan O'Brien wrote that up, and I know Minister Burton is also concerned about it, that in the boom period, we moved people from being potentially workers into disability and invalidity in massive numbers. Now, does that do children any favour? And I find that there's some of that bias in the Mangan report. The way the lobby groups and the submissions were highly critical of family income supplement. Well, what I like about family income supplement, it gets resources to people who are working, and work is the eventual solution in this area. And I was concerned, Minister, on pages 28, where they modelled the two-tier proposal. 2/3 of parents and family income supplements would lose between 1 and 100 euros, and less than 20% would gain between 1 and 50 euros. That seemed to me to be a particularly ill-advised route to go. So, you know, maybe, you know, if we're to discredit cash as a means of helping low-income people, well, don't do it in a way that disadvantages low-income workers, and let's ensure that the cash is turned into the benefits that you seek and our senators across the floor seek, rather than just more layers of bureaucracy. And what happened when we recruited 4,500 extra special needs assistants in schools in about a 4-year period? It must be one of the biggest recruitment programs ever, and I never hear it being evaluated evaluated, because there is no pot of gold. We can't come into this House and say, if we ever had a surplus in the budget, this is what we'd like to spend it on. There is no surplus. We have spent a lot of money, and we're bad at evaluating outcomes. Now, having said that, I agree with what Senator Van Turner called the academic parts of the paper. There seems to be a conclusive piece of evidence early intervention is good. But does that mean, for instance, when we're a devil's advocate or a contrarian culture, does that mean we should stop spending money on postdoctoral fellowships? Because if people are still in their 30s in university, they might have grown up by this stage, and we wouldn't like to give it to the 3-year-olds whom the Minister has been speaking about. The other final point in conclusion, in that, have we made childcare by excessive regulation too expensive? Are the requirements so high? Because it is a contradiction that in a society with 14.8% unemployment, that a service like childcare should be so expensive. What's the logjam that enters into your mind as you confront this situation? But just before I sit down, to thank you, Minister, for raising all these issues, for bringing them here to the Senate. These, if you like, tutorials in how you're addressing the situation and asking us for some input. We appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Margaret, Senator Koshkeen.
Thank you very much, and welcome, Minister, to the House. And I want to, like all of the other senators, indeed compliment you on the work you are doing since you took office. And I think you've shown the way, and indeed more than shown the way, and led your department. And I think it behoves all of us, all of government, to come behind you in this most important portfolio, because it is the most important portfolio. Many of the contributors have spoken about what it costs, but in actual fact what we should be talking about is what it saves. What this department can save, what this minister can save this country by putting the programmes in place that she's working on. And I would hope that everybody is listening and reading that report that the Minister produced, and actually putting their back behind the Minister to ensure that it's not looked at as a cost department, it is actually looked at as a savings department. There is increasing evidence right throughout the world. It has been there for lots of years in America, and recently in Ireland, and the various reports have been mentioned there, be it from the profile, the children profile at school at the Geary Institute, Professor Ruther Scott and Perry, growing up in Ireland. And I can't without mention, because I spend my life working with preschool, be it in lecturing or whatever, in Dr. Maria Montessori. When she started off her life, she started off in the slums of Italy, and she recognised that if you got the children early, in the very early period, not alone 0 to 3, but in the prenatal, perinatal, mothering period, that they returned to the state, and the children led the way. It was the children who showed that what they could do, and they brought home to their parents what they learned. And Minister, you've said it yourself in your speech there, all of the research that has indicated the sensitive periods in the process of the development, laying a foundation in childhood and beyond for cognitive functioning, behavioural, social and self-regulatory capacities. Many children face various stresses during these years that can impair their healthy development. Early childhood intervention programmes are designed to mitigate the factors that place children at risk of poor outcomes. Such programmes provide supports for the parents, the children or the family as a whole, and Minister Fitzgerald is doing that. And these supports may be in the form of learning activities or other structured experiences that affect the child directly, or that have indirect effects such as training parents or otherwise enhancing caregiving environment. As part of a recent study, not in this country but in America, there were various there was, I think, 19 or 20 peer-reviewed literature that has all shown the effectiveness of early intervention. Investing additional resources in early childhood education and the economic gains that accrue from that. They're there to overcome threats to healthy development such as resource disparities in early childhood, and also addresses the consequences of those threats for educational outcomes and beyond. Programmes that provide child development services from the prenatal period until early intervention into school, preschool, and that scientific studies and sound evaluation is important. A literature review identified 20 such programmes, 19 which have been favourable on the outcome of programmes that have been put in place. That's American-based research, which is more advanced than the Irish, but the Irish are catching up, and thanks to the Minister in the research she has been commissioning herself on that as well. The first group, I would say family support, home visiting, services provided, all of those, and the Minister mentioned there about bringing services into the classroom as well, and in childcare, child-centred environments. All of this has been proven to show and to have beneficial. The programmes, supplemented by parental education delivered in the same settings and through home visits, have all been found to be beneficial. Early intervention programmes demonstrated significant, often sizable benefits in at least, I'll just mention a few, of the progression of educational attainment, health, delinquency and crime, social welfare, programme use, labour market success, and in some cases the improved outcomes in these domains were demonstrated soon after the programme had ended. In other cases, favourable impacts were observed through adolescence and into the transition to adulthood. In the case of the preschool programme, lasting benefits in multiple domains have been measured for 35 years after the intervention ended. And other speakers and yourself, Minister, have mentioned it in your report. The savings that have made to the state, be it 1 to 16 or even later, has been shown being at 1 to 26 for the investment. The evidence indicates there can be longer lasting, substantial gain outcomes. So, Minister, I think you know yourself, and as other speakers have said, the report should be circulated widely, and parents of participating children can also gain from the early intervention programmes, not only the children themselves. And youth unemployment, and I think it was Gillian Van Turner that mentioned the ratio of GDP for youth unemployment. In actual fact, it would save the same amount of more by early intervention programmes. Did you say I've
Thomas D.
Thomas J. Well, look, I have so much to say on it because I've been working on it for so long. Minister, it's in good hands. That's all I can say, and well done.
Oh my God. Senator Riley, your name isn't here, but are you on this?
Yeah.
Okay, it's not on the list I got, so okay, you would be next in line.
First of all, I'd like to welcome the Minister to China today, and this is a very important topic, as other senators have said, and definitely one that is in need of greater attention by all parties in the Oireachtas. No bother. I'd also like to welcome the content of the contribution I was listening from my office, and I do share your support for greater levels of investment in early intervention for our children, and I do welcome your endorsement of universal services in this area. And I, along with my Sinn Féin colleagues, have long advocated that the state learns from those Nordic countries who have proven to be world leaders in the area. I would have one concern, however. On the one hand, we do have a Minister for Children who clearly does understand the kinds of policy interventions that are needed to address issues of child poverty. And we have a government who proactively enshrined the rights of children into our constitution. But on the other hand, we do have a government who are implementing policies and budgets that are having the effect of increasing the number of children in poverty and cutting vital funding from educational and youth services that are having a detrimental impact therein on the well-being of children, particularly those in disadvantaged communities. So while I don't question your sincerity, Minister, not at all, in any guise in your opening remarks today, an outsider and myself would have to judge based on the government's actions to improve the well-being of children, particularly those living at risk of poverty. And if you look at some of the figures, Minister, 270,000 children in the state suffer some level of poverty, and latest statistics by the CSO show that a further 35,000 have fallen into poverty. And yesterday, Bernardo's Women's Council of Ireland Open and Start Strong called for an additional investment of €2 billion in childcare to benefit early development. And they argue that this investment should target childcare provision, child literacy and numeracy, and increasing the attendance of children from disadvantaged backgrounds in school, all of which would have the benefits for the children themselves and Irish society and the economy in general. And we do continue to underspend in this area. Currently, we spend 0.25% of GDP in preschool education. In Denmark, the figure is 1.3%. At the same time, our child poverty rate is 11.4%, while in Denmark it's 5.4%. While clearly our higher level of poverty is not solely due to underinvestment in early interventions and preschool education, there is some kind of relationship there. I know in your opening remarks you did ask if it was realistic to talk about increased investment in early intervention in the current economic climate. I know Senator Keane mentioned that we should look at what savings this department can make, because if we do intervene at an early stage, we can make savings into the future. And countries who do invest more into preschool education and early intervention do have stronger economies and more stable and equal societies. Minister, I just want to draw your attention just to one thing, and it's been raised with me numerous times in the last couple of weeks, and there seems to be increasing numbers of cases, and it's in relation to appointments for the diagnosis and assessment of autism spectrum disorder, and the waiting list in Cavan currently stands at 25 months. And what's happening there is that families, while they're waiting assessment, children can't get resource hours or home support help until they get a diagnosis. So that kind of flies in the face, essentially, of the early intervention. And more young people and young children are faced with this. And I'm having families coming to me where the child might be in first or second class, but is really only at a junior infants class level. They're not getting the supports they needed. They're being told they're on this massive waiting list. They don't know what to do. They can't get, if they get a private psychological assessment, they're being told that isn't sufficient. They need to wait to get the NEPS assessment or the child and adolescent psychiatrist or psychological services assessment, and that is creating a barrier. And I'd just like to ask the Minister if she can make a comment on that, and how her department with the HSE are working to try and deal with that backlog and make sure that those resources are targeted to make sure that these children aren't going to be missing out on their education. And it's going to cost us more in the long run if we don't intervene now to help those children and to make sure they can get those supports, because it is putting a lot of strain on families, on children, on schools when they can't get through these resources. So I'd just like to ask the Minister if she can address that in her contribution.
Very good. Senator Eamon Coughlin.
Oireachtas and Minister, you're very welcome to the House. And I know, not just from a ministerial perspective, but from a parental perspective, you are very interested in this particular area, and I know your heart and soul is in it, so congratulations to you. I have a quote here that says, "An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure." That was from Henry de Bracton in 1240. That's a long, long time ago. And as we know, Minister, there have been numerous outstanding reports and studies written on the subject of early intervention and other related matters. I guess the Start Strong document, which I read, the economics of children's early years, focused on the cost and benefits of early care and education in Ireland. And in Ireland, of the amount of public spending on children and families, only 20% goes towards early childhood ages between birth and 5, 37% goes to the middle years 6 to 11, and 44% to later years, that is 12 to 17. Our spending on services for young children is weak by international standards, as you alluded to yourself, especially for the very youngest. And as a large proportion of social expenditure on young children takes the form of cash benefits rather than services. In another report, Dr. Orla Dial from UCD, the Guerry Institute, on early educational investment as an economic recovery and strategy concludes that there are high returns on early investment. And I think Senator Hayden referred to, for every euro invested, there's 29 euro in benefits. These benefits include lower crime rate, less social intervention, better health, and even employment down the road. I want to approach this from perhaps a different perspective than has been brought into the House here today, from a perspective of a parent, a grandparent, an athletics coach. And I believe that I'm fully qualified to know the benefits of early intervention in the development of physical literacy and the fundamental movement skills for our very young. Not just physical literary skills, but they also aid numeracy and literary skills too. I'd like to tell you that I'm at an advanced stage with the Department of Health in the development of my Points for Life initiative, which I've been in discussions with you recently, and hopefully the introduction of a pilot scheme for primary schools will commence sometime later this year. The aim of this programme is to develop physical literacy and fundamental movement skills in primary school children from a very young age, so that they will have the competency, the skills necessary to become active young people and more likely to take part in sporting activities and remain active throughout their lives. While the Points for Life initiative is aimed at primary schools, I truly believe that these fundamental skills should be introduced to children from birth, parents, caretakers, should be taught the importance of practicing it consistently, of developing these physical literacy skills, and should fully understand the benefits of having active young toddlers and children. Teaching the fundamentals of physical literacy should be introduced, I believe, in a preschool environment as a priority, Minister. Why? Because the capacity for change decreases with age. It is more efficient, both biologically and economically, to get things right the first time rather than try to fix them later. I think exposure to levels of physical stress early in life can positively affect the architecture of the developing brain. Now, the Canadian model, HOP, as it's called, nice word, which is healthy opportunities for preschoolers, have introduced a number of initiatives together with guidelines for parents dealing with developing physical literacy for children from birth through 12 years of age. HOP is based on the belief that all children benefit from daily physical activity that promotes health-related fitness and movement skills. It is important that individuals responsible for the well-being of preschool children are aware of the value of physical activity to help facilitate each child's movement experience. More and more children are spending time in the care of others, and the care environment where caregivers can play an active role is positively shaping the children's futures is an ideal place to promote physical activity. Your recent report, Minister, Growing Up in Ireland, produced some startling findings, as we recall. Among these, 26% of 9-year-olds were found to have mass body index that was outside the healthy range, and of these, 19% was defined as obese. The very young are extremely eager to learn, I believe, and we can start to teach fundamental movement skills at this very young age, literally from birth through 6, because I believe it will lay the foundations for future success in developing these skills. Minister, starting at the very young preschool ages enhances the development of brain function, coordination, social skills, motor skills, emotional development, leadership and imagination. It also helps children to build confidence and to develop positive self-esteem. Needless to say, it also helps to build strong bones, muscles, improves flexibility and develops good posture, improves fitness and promotes a healthy body weight and reduces stress and improvement. Now, I know I'm under the constraints of time, but Minister, I really truly believe, having seen young children, my own children, my grandchildren, develop at such a very young age these basic motory and movement skills, how advanced they have become as young adults and adults in their future lives. And I really think it starts at the ground up, and I think at preschool is the most important way of advancing all these health-related issues.
Senator Zappo, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Les Geerlich. Welcome to the House, Minister. Happy International Women's Week. 2 women at the cabinet table, 12 men. Well, you've got the evidence, Minister. You've got the dynamism, the vision, the ambition. And isn't this government based on evidence in terms of evidence is important for the policy? So that's your speech, actually, Minister. And everybody should get it as, and I seriously do mean that. Yeah, I think you demonstrate that ambition, the evidence gathering from a long period of time, new evidence coming from the country, how critical that is. In preparing my remarks today, too, I took the opportunity to take a look at your department's overall strategy, and your mission statement says to lead the effort to improve outcomes for children and young people in Ireland. And then, as you know so well, there's this long list of things that you'll do in order to implement the strategy, and every single one of them in that list has been either completed or you've begun to do the work on. And I think, again, your speech demonstrates a lot of the detail of that, and I want to commend you for that. But I think your desire to develop and implement, presumably, to lead the National Early Years Strategy, I think that actually has the potential to become your greatest legacy. And indeed, that some of that is built on the government before, and it's wonderful to see some of that seamless commitment coming through, as Senator Layton identified. But it's you who are there, who are championing now that cultural shift of our children's public programs to prevention and early intervention. And as you know, and that's what you spoke about, there is a bias currently in favor of policies that support later intervention, and that's expensive, and it's ineffective as well. So I think it's really critical to commend you on that and to support you with that. In relation to the early year strategies, then, I have two questions. The first question is maybe perhaps to note, and I hope it's not too presumptuous, but to think that you might say yes, that will your strategy contain a commitment to invest in the services that prevention and early intervention sites have demonstrated that work and that work in Irish settings? You've identified, a lot of the evaluations that are coming through, and as you've said before, there are some things that didn't work, but there are some things that are doing work, and I hope to see in the strategy that comes forward, there is a commitment to begin to implement, not necessarily absolutely exactly or in every site throughout Ireland, etc., but there is a commitment to begin to invest in those that have demonstrated to work. Secondly, will your strategy name the systems that will be developed to enable the schools, the new agency that you're about to establish, community, voluntary, and private providers of children's services, parents and children to work together in an integrated fashion? Pardon me? Sorry? Somebody says, oh, sorry. I thought you said something clearly.
You're okay.
Pardon me?
You're okay. You have another 2.5 minutes.
Oh, thank you. Okay. That's just exactly the amount I've got.
I certainly didn't interrupt you. It might be a foreign spirit.
Okay, thank you. Go for it. Okay, anyhow, so I'm just asking you, hoping to see that in that strategy there's going to be a development and a naming of the systems, not just the ways of working, but the systems that need to change in order to develop that integration. The other thing I want to add, since your speech covered this, is, and other senators have commented on this, what's come out of in terms of issues related to the Mangan report. And we're certainly aware of the budgetary decisions that were made prior to the publication of that report, and the issues of cash versus services, or perhaps cash plus services. And Senator Barrett, I think, spoke a lot at length about this, and I would agree with much of what he's saying. I do think, and again, Minister, as you're aware, that the next piece of the Mangan report is going to take a look at in-work benefits for those perhaps lower income families, and that's really important information for us to have so that to ensure that the reform of child income supports is done at the same time there's an incentivization for those people to stay in employment. But I think perhaps you might consider as well is what we may need is also some examination to take a look at, and this takes up, I think, something Senator Barrett was talking about, to look at the cash plus services, to do some examination really of the amounts of money, let's say in terms of child income support, and what types of services could match with that in order to produce the best kind of outcomes in different environments. But I think certainly, and this is what I said to Minister Burton, I think you both have the moral authority to look for reform without any more savings in relation to child income support. So I think that I support you on that. My final points have to do with, I think, really in terms of the economic issues. You did quote and identify, and other senators have done it as well, research in relation to the benefits and the costs of early years strategy. And I see that as kind of the first generation research, much of that. Now, not the ones that have come through here in Ireland, but Jim Hickman. I met him when we were setting out on the prevention and early intervention sites that are eventually presented. But now we have coming through, I think, a second generation type of research. And I want to ask if you're considering investigating new and innovative approaches to estimate the costs and the benefits of interventions and services, building on that earlier period. New econometric models are being developed, Minister, to estimate the benefits and the costs for local and central government in order to inform government decisions about early interventions. An evidence base for investment holds considerable potential to assist strategic decision-making with regard to competing policies and programs. We only have so much money. We can only fund certain things. So there's new research emerging based on these econometric models, which help us to carefully select investments that can make a big difference not only to children's outcomes but also to the public purse. And this, I'm here, I want to just mention the renowned Washington Institute for Public Policy has created a model for the U.S., and my colleague, Professor Michael Little in Dartington in the U.K., is working with that institute to create a model for Europe. They're developing a way to estimate what a particular service costs, for example, a reading program, a reduction in class size, and what the economic benefits are to the child, to the local agency, to the state. And then they provide an analysis to suggest policy options for the legislator. And it's that, I'm just coming to the conclusion, it's that institute that informed the early learning strategy of the governor of the state of Washington, whom you met with me there a while back, and when they produced that, I think, groundbreaking early years strategy. So it seems to me, in conclusion, that as Ireland sets out to publish its first national early years strategy, this could be a prime opportunity to take the lead throughout Europe to develop such a model for present and future legislators so that we can improve outcomes for children with smart, targeted and modest sums of investment.
Senator Moore, in 5 minutes.
I'd like to welcome the Minister back to the House this evening and commend her yet again on her ongoing work in this area. There's a large body of international research, and I think everybody, I kind of don't want to rehash what everybody has said. I think we're all singing from the same hymn sheet, you know, that we do all recognise the importance of investing in child's early care and education, and that it makes this, of course, will make economic sense in the long run. Child poverty is something of growing concern in the country with a rate of 19.7%. We know that growing up in